To grasp the extent of the mafia's influence, one must recognize its transformation into both a political and criminal entity. This documentary delves into the history of Frank Costello, shedding light on the intricate interplay of politics and organized crime. Born in 1891, Costello possessed a seniority over Luciano upon arriving in America, affording him valuable experience. His charisma and remarkable intelligence, noted by Luciano alongside Meyer Lansky, set him apart as one of the sharpest minds. Through Costello, Luciano discovered that intelligence was not confined to the Jewish community. Costello's astuteness extended to the realm of politics and corruption, a craft he honed under the guidance of Arnold Rothstein. Following the demise of Arnold Rothstein in 1928, Costello meticulously built relationships that would become instrumental for the mafia. He reached out to naval intelligence, establishing a crucial connection that facilitated Luciano's eventual prison release. However, misconceptions surround this alliance with naval intelligence. Contrary to popular belief, the link wasn't confined to New York. Much of the military equipment and personnel involved moved out of Louisiana, a strategic decision based on geographical convenience. The connection between America's intelligence agencies and organized crime extended beyond New York, with Frank Costello relocating most of his operations to Louisiana in the 1930s. In doing so, he played a pivotal role in the creation of the Carlos Marcello criminal syndicate. In my research, I've uncovered that Frank Costello served as the crucial link between intelligence agencies and the mafia, earning him the moniker Prime Minister of the Underworld. While Luciano was in exile and Lansky operated from Havana, Cuba, Costello assumed a ruling role over a majority of the operations. In a previous Luciano documentary, I delved into Luciano's role in testing Costello's abilities, particularly in manipulating elections across New York and corrupting the state's entire police force. Costello orchestrated an operation that infiltrated small police firms, gradually gaining control until the entire state was under the influence of organized crime. Beyond the police force, after Costello's passing on December 22, 1975, Time magazine uncovered a critical link between J. Edgar Hoover and Frank Costello. In a revealing quote from Time magazine on page 34, it states, "During the 40s, Hoover was reluctant to move against organized crime. Some FBI agents think they know why. They tell stories of Hoover sometimes traveling to Manhattan to meet one of the mafia's top figures, Frank Costello. Frank apparently convinced Hoover that there was no organized mafia, merely a loose collection of independent racketeers. Some agents figure that Hoover also picked up some choice incidental tips from gambler Costello on the director's passionately pursued avocation, laying $2 bets on the horses. Hoover did not get cracking on the mob until Attorney General Robert Kennedy insisted that he do so in 1961. The question lingers. How did someone like Frank Costello manage to corrupt so many, extending his influence from New York to New Orleans, Louisiana, and even reaching the head of the FBI, J. Edgar Hoover? The intrigue deepens, as it wasn't only Hoover, but also the Central Intelligence Agency that became entangled in the web of Costello's influence. The connection between organized crime and the CIA took root immediately after the Second World War, coinciding with America's ascension onto the global stage. Notably, the presidency transitioned from Franklin D. Roosevelt to Harry S. Truman, who maintained strong ties to organized crime. In this exploration, we will delve into Costello's background, tracing his ascent, examining his father's history, and exploring his own journey. Additionally, we'll unravel the circumstances surrounding his meeting with Luciano and his pivotal role during the era of prohibition and bootlegging wars. Following the era of bootlegging, we transition to the downfall of Arnold Rothstein, a chapter we touched upon in the Luciano documentary. However, it was Costello who, in the aftermath, orchestrated the movement of figures like Phil, Dandy Castell, Seymour Weiss, and Frank Erickson to Louisiana. Their mission: taking control of gambling operations and spearheading the establishment of new casinos, including the iconic Beverly Club. This historical juncture gained significance as Carlos Marcello, deeply entwined in these operations, became inseparable from Costello, starting in 1935. Costello's profound understanding of political corruption, extending his influence from the United States to global spheres, is paramount to grasp. Upon Costello's retirement, it became evident that he would answer to Carlos Marcello, effectively entrusting him with control over Washington. While Costello was a man of handshakes, Marcello delved into a darker realm, compiling evidence of politicians engaging in illicit activities, such as infidelity with prostitutes. Employing a range of tactics from bribery to intimidation, and even murder, Marcello ruled with an iron fist, showcasing both a nuanced and sinister side. His mastery of political corruption was a legacy learned and expanded upon from his association with Frank Costello. Understanding the dynamics of power, it's imperative to recognize that Frank Costello wielded influence over New York politics, despite facing opposition from figures like LaGuardia. Anticipating the storm's passing, he strategically shifted operations southward, ensuring dominance in southern politics. By aligning with the Huey Long faction, he gained protection. This move marked the mafia's expansion across America, solidifying control over both the northern and southern political landscapes. With Chicago, Pennsylvania, and New York under control in the north, and Louisiana, Texas, and other states in the south, organized crime's reach now spanned the entire nation. The pivotal role of the mafia in shaping political outcomes became evident, as winning the White House necessitated success in both the North and the South. Under Frank Costello's influence, figures like Santo Trafficante in Florida, Antonio Cardo, and Paul Ricca in Chicago became key players, further consolidating organized crime's sway. In contrast to Luciano's exile and limited prison time, Costello's narrative unfolds within the United States throughout his life. The story takes a different trajectory, showcasing a steady convergence of power as this formidable network, orchestrated by Luciano, gains strength and influence across the nation. Let's embark on the journey of Frank Costello's life, tracing his roots from birth until 1910. From 1910 to 1920, we'll delve into pivotal moments, such as his encounter with Luciano, his time behind bars, and his ascent in the criminal underworld. This period will also encompass the emergence of bootlegging and the establishment of Costello's empire. The narrative will unfold as we explore Costello's strategic moves in the early days of bootlegging, including ventures to islands like Newfoundland and the establishment of connections in England and Europe. We'll unravel the intricate network he built, collaborating with distilleries and liquor companies to ensure a steady supply chain to Newfoundland. This strategic hub served as the gateway for smuggling operations into America. As Costello's empire expanded, we'll examine his foray into real estate and gambling. Simultaneously, we'll provide a broader context of the organized crime landscape during this era, connecting the dots to understand the global dynamics at play. The focus will shift to Costello's political contacts and his skillful maneuvering to corrupt Washington. This political history is pivotal in comprehending the intricate web of influence he wove. As we approach the 40s, a preview of the role played by individuals like Carlos Marcello, Frank Costello, and Meyer Lansky in making the South the epicenter of money laundering for the entire mafia will set the stage for future explorations. This journey through history aims to shed light on the individual, his political prowess, and the far-reaching impact of his alliances within the complex world of organized crime. In my documentary, I won't cover every name associated with Frank Costello, as his influence spans in numerous directions. We'll focus on key individuals to comprehend the power of organized crime, while my previous Luciano documentary explored the logistics of building a criminal empire. With Costello, we delve into the FBI and political corruption. Notably, his move into Louisiana and New Orleans played a pivotal role in shaping Carlos Marcello's criminal syndicate. Marcello, however, vehemently denied being made by Frank, asserting his pre-existing wealth. Yet, the ties ran deep, especially through Marcello's wife's connection to a heavily mafia-affiliated family. In my upcoming series, figures like Joseph P. Kennedy, John Kennedy, Phil Dandy Castile, and Jewish mobsters will feature prominently. The mafia's investments in the South during the 30s, 40s, and 50s generated substantial wealth. Marcello, emerging as a powerhouse, became the boss of bosses. The CIA conducted operations, training mercenaries in the South, including Louisiana. Understanding the criminal activities from the 30s onwards, it becomes clear how, by 1960, a criminal family could influence and kill a US president. Costello's political reach was extensive. In 1960, Joseph P. Kennedy's alliance with organized crime sent a signal across America, allowing deals with unions and organized crime figures. However, when the Kennedys turned on the mafia, many politicians found themselves vulnerable, having engaged in corrupt dealings. Costello's corruption extended beyond politics, offering seats, real estate, stocks, shares, and substantial bribes to politicians. The corruption reached such levels that investigators questioned politicians about unaccounted-for wealth. Costello's actions, detrimental to America, facilitated the mafia's rise, shielded by political police and intelligence agency protection. As the tide turned, Costello's political shield waned, leading to a gradual decline. Yet corruption persisted, shifting from the hands of the mafia to major corporations, as they too wielded immense influence through financial means. In today's world, the legacy of Frank Costello's corruption endures. The Prime Minister of Organized Crime, Frank Costello, was born on January 26, 1891, in Loropoli, Calabria, Italy. Despite Loropoli not being renowned for organized crime or the Sicilian mafia, it was known for harboring a robust criminal class. Frank's birthplace was often referred to as the land of lawbreakers. This town, steeped in history tracing back to the ancient Greeks, provided a unique backdrop to Frank Costello's origins. Frank's father had a distinguished history as well. In 1865, he answered the call to serve in the army, fighting with Garibaldi's legion for the new Kingdom of Italy. He emerged as a decorated war hero, earning a medal for valor in the Battle of Tirab. In 1870, after marrying, he and his wife welcomed 6 children, among them Eddie, Frank's elder brother by 10 years. Following his retirement from the army, Frank's father transitioned to farming. However, the income was insufficient to sustain the growing family, plunging them into poverty. Faced with dire circumstances, Frank's father made the decision to relocate to America in 1895, taking his daughters and eldest son, Eddie, along. The letters he sent back painted a grim picture of America, describing it as impoverished, akin to Italy, yet surrounded by an even poorer community, teeming with foreign individuals, criminals, gangsters, and crooks from various backgrounds. These letters, expressing disappointment and hardship, revealed the struggles Frank Costello's family faced in their pursuit of a better life in America. Frank's father endured unemployment for 6 consecutive months, and his correspondence to his wife detailed the financial challenges, even to the point of being unable to afford the journey back to reunite with his family. Securing more money in Italy seemed a more promising prospect for Frank's mother than the challenges his father faced in America. The situation had deteriorated to the point where Frank's father urged his wife to sell everything, the house, the bed, even the bedsheets, just to make the journey to join him. Despite the seemingly insurmountable odds, he clung to hope in the land he called America. This pivotal letter arrived on a fortuitous day for young Frank, who found himself in a bit of trouble. At the tender age of 5, he was caught pilfering wild berries and fruits from a farmer's land. Luckily, his grandfather served as a watchman for the landowner, and Frank, quick on his feet, convinced the guards that he, too, was assisting in the watchman duties. In a stroke of luck, they believed him and rewarded him with 5 lire. Frank and his mother used this unexpected windfall to purchase a new suit, an essential possession for his impending journey to America. Arriving in America hand in hand with his mother, Marie Severia Aloise, Frank's family embarked on a journey to New York in 1896. Luciano's family would follow a short time later, making their way to Palermo. Marie had to navigate through Naples to board the ship, jumping onto a smaller boat to reach the larger vessel. Despite a mishap with a sudden wave that left Frank's new suit muddy and dirty, his mother interpreted it as a sign of good luck, reassuring him that their future would improve. In New York, like many other Italian immigrants seeking a better life, Frank and his mother faced the challenges and opportunities that awaited them. Those with some means sought out better communities, unaware of the significant role Frank Costello would eventually play in the world of organized crime. Frank and his mother arrived in New York in the year of 1896 and saw the poverty for themselves. People were extremely poor. Frank and his mother moved through the crowd, dealt with the immigration issues, and then accompanied the rest of their family waiting for them. They settled into East Harlem, by the river on Morningside, Washington Heights bluffs. By the year 1896, that entire area was extremely poor. It was basically a slum. In 1896, Frank made his arrival, and by 1949 he would find himself gracing the front page cover of Time magazine. In the opening paragraph of this feature, the magazine painted a vivid picture of the world surrounding Frank Costello during his initial year in America and the pivotal year of 1949. Considering Frank Costello's arrival in America around 1896 and the article being written in 1949, a span of at least 50 years, it becomes evident that the socio-economic conditions during Costello's early years in the late 19th century were challenging. The author's assertion made half a century later that poverty had not significantly improved underscores the magnitude of the difficulties faced by immigrants and the impoverished during Costello's initial years in the United States. It prompts reflection on the harsh realities of that era, emphasizing the enduring nature of poverty and the struggles faced by those who sought a new life in America during the late 1800s. This historical context adds depth to the narrative, highlighting the socio-economic challenges that individuals like Frank Costello navigated as they endeavored to establish themselves in a new and often unforgiving environment. Time magazine wrote about East Harlem. The scarred and swarming tenements along Harlem's East 108th Street have changed little since Gambler. Frank Costello was a boy. The towers of the Triborough Bridge now float in the sky just beyond their chimneys, and a snare drum roll of traffic drifts up from the modern East River Drive. Negroes and Puerto Ricans choke the slums to west and north. But the old neighborhood is still Italian. Its sidewalk garbage cans, each with its cover chained to prevent theft. Its great, voracious rats, its smells, its endless noise are the same. Jostling armies of liquid-eyed children still play in its filthy glass-strewn alleys, its dark hallways, and in vacant lots, where the refuse of generations is packed solid, a foot higher than the sidewalks. Its old men are sad. The young men who haunt its streets by night callow bravos with oiled black hair, sharp suits, and the melancholy curse of pimples loiter in knots with expressionless faces, just as they did when Frank Costello had a gun in his pocket and was one of them. Then, as now, East 108th Street was a hard place to live. It was harder to leave. The palaces of Manhattan's power and wealth rose up only a few blocks to the south, but to the poor of Italian Harlem, they were as remote and incredible as the palaces of India. Frank Costello escaped to live in them by a process as devious and dangerous as an escape from Devil's Island. He became a rum runner, a slot machine king, a gambler and intimate of killers, a political fixer, and a man of riches and influence. He was not the only boy from a slum who got rich in the rackets. In his day, the US had become as much a land of opportunity for the graduate of Dannemora as for the graduate of Dartmouth. In 1896, Frank Costello found himself immersed in a grim reality. The Italian community, largely concentrated around the Fifth and First Avenues, faced a harsh reception in their adopted land. Struggling with the language barrier, Italian immigrants clashed with the local Irish communities, competing for limited resources in the same poverty-stricken neighborhoods. During this tumultuous time, Luciano, Costello, and others experienced the bitter struggles between the Irish and Italian communities, often erupting into clashes for various reasons. The prevailing atmosphere demanded resilience, as both groups grappled with racial tensions. Being Italian or Irish didn't shield individuals from the pervasive racism that lingered between the communities. Frank and his family confronted the harsh reality of racism when his father secured a job at a pickaxe company. On payday, as he walked home with his hard-earned paycheck, he fell victim to Irish thugs seeking revenge for perceived slights by Italians. The brutal assault left Frank's father battered, bruised and stripped of his wages, a tragic consequence of simmering animosities. As Frank's father recounted the ordeal, Frank vividly remembered the tears in his father's eyes and the derogatory slurs hurled at him during the attack. Terms like guineas echoed in his mind, leaving an indelible mark. This experience haunted Frank, instilling in him a profound aversion to racism. Determined never to perpetuate such hatred, he made a conscious choice to associate with individuals from diverse backgrounds. When questioned about his motivations for entering a life of crime, Frank admitted pondering the same question. Despite the introspection, he acknowledged that deep down, the experiences of his formative years fueled his entry into hoodlum activities. The memory of his father's suffering served as a poignant reminder, shaping Frank Costello into someone who valued unity across racial and cultural divides. Frank once said, "Take a look at the area I grew up in on East 108th Street, Harlem, where the poverty was so bad that I had to do something to feed myself and my family. It was an extreme struggle where you had to do something to survive." He vividly painted a scenario, recounting, "When an Irish landlord was relentlessly tormenting me and my family for rent money, I took matters into my own hands. I robbed the landlord and used the proceeds to pay the rent. When hunger struck, I resorted to stealing food and brought it home to feed my family. And when the need for protection arose, I simply organized gangs." In the face of adversity, he navigated a world where survival often demanded unconventional measures. Frank, driven by an unwavering commitment to family survival, navigated a path through the shadows of a turbulent environment. His loyal, legitimate friends often remarked, "Place a smart boy in bad company, and he'll rise to lead it, steering it cleverly." Frank found himself in a smart bad company, turning it into the most formidable outfit, albeit one engaged in regrettable pursuits. A crucial element in Frank Costello's descent into a life of crime was the influence of his older brother, Eddie. Eddie, a constant presence in Frank's life, drew him into street gang activities and warfare. Despite these entanglements, Frank, a loner at heart since childhood, aspired to forge his own path within the criminal underworld. While Eddie proved to be a persistent source of headache, Frank eventually assumed the role of protector, bringing his older brother under his wing. Another instance illuminating Frank's commitment to family emerged when his mother sent him to his aunt's farm for assistance. A mishap ensued as Frank climbed a tree, resulting in a fall that left him with a leg caught underneath him. While recovering at his aunt's, he overheard a prior argument between his mother and the landlady concerning overdue rent. Costello, ever astute, had observed the landlady's habits and learned a valuable detail. She safeguarded her money in her bosom, eschewing banks due to mistrust. In a bid to support his family, Frank utilized this knowledge within the realm of crime. This meant that Costello could access it with a gun. Keeping a watchful eye on her routines, he discovered her habit of rising early to clean all the stairs around the properties. Frank, patient and calculating, would wait until the late-night hours when he limped his way home through the quiet roads, traversing the 92nd Street ferry across the East River. returning to his residence. Intent on robbing his landlady, Frank retrieved his handkerchief from the cellar, covering his face as he plotted. As his heart raced, Frank positioned himself behind the cellar door, awaiting the landlady's approach. When she arrived looking the other way, he seized the opportunity, throwing his arms around her and relieving her of the money. Hobbling through the yard to 107th Street, Frank's daring endeavor took an unfortunate turn when he was recognized by the landlady. Her shouts of "thief" pierced the early sunrise, prompting her to rush to Frank's door. His mother, alerted by the commotion, vehemently denied his presence at home, asserting that he had not been there since Sunday. The landlady, undeterred, reported the incident to the police, triggering a thorough investigation that revealed Frank's absence as he was recuperating at his aunt's house with a bandaged knee. Despite their impoverished circumstances, Frank's family exhibited remarkable entrepreneurial spirit. His mother established a general store in East Harlem, selling an array of items from sardines and candy to codfish and other essential goods for the Italian community. Devoting long hours to the shop, she contributed to the family income. With both parents now working outside the home, Frank grew up with a sense of freedom, unrestrained and able to do as he pleased. Frank Costello's formative years saw his first brush with the law by the age of 10. As the calendar turned to 1910, Costello entered his teenage years. But his journey took a unique turn during World War I. His husky voice spared him from military service, while notable figures like Luciano, Lansky, and Siegal faced different circumstances. The early 1900s, however, marked a significant shift for Costello. Unable to participate in the war, Costello's distinctive qualities, suave demeanor, charisma, and a Christ-like age, positioned him to navigate the evolving landscape. Prohibition, arriving at the end of the decade, presented a ripe opportunity for someone in their 30s. Costello emerged as a key player, excelling where others faltered. His ability to enter political realms set him apart, offering access to rooms that eluded Luciano. In environments teeming with vultures, Costello's patience and adept conversational skills thrived. By the 20s, Costello had become adept at maneuvering political conversations and reading elite figures. He strategically began his ascent in local government elections, gradually climbing the political ladder. As the decade progressed, he solidified his influence, ultimately dominating New York's political landscape. Meanwhile, other influential mob bosses, like Jacques Guzik in Chicago, Carlos Marcello, and Santo Trafficante, also established their political footholds, pooling their efforts under Costello's leadership. These crime bosses formed one of the most potent lobbying forces in America during the 30s and 40s. Their influence extended to Washington, where the sway of these mob-connected figures made passing laws nearly impossible without their approval. With Costello at the forefront, this coalition wielded immense power, effectively controlling the destinies of senators and impacting the legislative landscape in ways that resonated far beyond the criminal underworld. Around 1910 to 1914, Frank crossed paths with a young man named Salvatore Lucania. Although Frank never pinpointed the exact moment of their meeting, he often mentioned connecting with Luciano through individuals like Arnold Rothstein. Luciano, on the other hand, recalled encountering Frank at the movies, where they attended to learn English by reading subtitles. Reflecting on their first meeting, Luciano's account sheds light on the early days of their association. It happened at a movie theater in Times Square. I think it was called the Victoria. It was on a Saturday night, and some of my guys and I went uptown to see what the action was. We liked to go to the movies because them silent pictures had titles, and they helped us learn English. Of course, we always sat on the balcony. It was cheaper. Besides, we could throw stuff down at the orchestra and raise all kinds of hell. This night, the manager threw us out at the same time he threw out some other guys who were sitting on the other side of the balcony. One of the guys was a little older than us, and he had an outfit called the 104th Street Gang. We got together, and it turns out that this older guy was not from Sicily. He was a Calabrian from Cosenza. His name was Francesco Castiglia. Later on he got famous under the name Frank Costello. The first time I heard him talk, I had to lean over to hear him because his voice was very husky, like he had a cold. A lot of Italian kids talk like that. Their mothers wanted the best for them, and they thought the best was to get their tonsils and adenoids out the first time the kid's nose started to run. A lot of times, the doctor wasn't so good, or the knife slipped, and the kid always talked like he had a permanent sore throat after that. That's what happened to Frank. Costello had already amassed an impressive rap sheet by the time he crossed paths with Luciano. In 1908 he faced arrest for assault and robbery, a case from which he emerged unscathed. 4 years later, in 1912, he found himself in custody again for another assault and robbery charge, only to be discharged once more. Operating his own gang in close proximity to Luciano's territory, Costello, then around 23 years old in 1914, and the 17-year-old Luciano joined forces, embarking on a criminal partnership. Despite their youth, Costello held a wealth of experience compared to Luciano. However, a pivotal mistake awaited him in 1915, when he was apprehended with a gun, leading to a prison sentence. This setback was particularly poignant for Costello, as the prior year in 1914 he had tied the knot with his wife, Loretta Geigerman. Loretta, an alluring young woman, hailed from a different world, residing on Upper Park Ave, an affluent area predominantly occupied by Jewish families. Frank and Charlie Luciano harbored a deep fascination for Jewish culture and its people. Frank, in particular, expressed admiration for the Jewish community, asserting that he both respected and was respected by them. He recounted the day he encountered Loretta, his Jewish wife, a meeting that carried a unique significance in his life. When I met Bobby Loretta, it was like meeting one of my own people. She didn't talk Italian, but the German dialect of her parents was foreign like mine. Bobby and I got along great from the first, although neither of our parents was so happy. Bobby's parents told her daughter she could do better than a poor Italian kid from East Harlem, and my mother, naturally, was hoping for an Italian girl. Deeply in love, Frank Costello and his wife applied for a marriage license in 1914, solidifying their commitment. The personal lives of Charlie, Lucky, Luciano, and Frank Costello shared intriguing parallels, particularly in their approach to love and family. While Luciano found love later in life with Igea Lissoni, a ballerina, Costello discovered love at a young age. However, a notable similarity between the two men was their decision not to have children of their own. Both Luciano and Costello, despite their romantic involvements with their wives and familial connections through nieces and nephews, chose not to venture into parenthood. This shared choice may have stemmed from a common realization that their roles in organized crime, with its inherent dangers and potential threats, made raising a family impractical. The brutal nature of their line of work, where violence was rampant and danger lurked at every corner, likely influenced their decision. Having children might have been seen as a vulnerability, exposing their loved ones to the risks associated with the criminal underworld. In a world where their lives were constantly at stake, the prospect of family life could have been deemed incompatible with the realities of their chosen paths. For both Costello and Luciano, their legacies and assets were bequeathed to their nieces and nephews. This decision reflected a conscious choice to ensure the well-being of their extended family without exposing them to the perils associated with being the direct descendants of prominent figures in organized crime. It underscores the complex interplay between their personal lives, sense of responsibility, and the harsh realities of the world they inhabited. When Costello submitted the application, he adopted the name that would later become famous, Frank Costello. In my Luciano documentary, I delved into the origins of this name, presenting both Luciano's and Frank's accounts. Frank, however, asserted that Costello was just one of several aliases he employed during that period. Their union faced an immediate challenge on March 12, 1915, when Costello found himself arrested and charged for carrying a gun. Exiting from a barber shop, the police spotted him and ordered him to halt. Choosing to run up an alley, Frank was swiftly apprehended. The period from the early 1900s to the mid-20s witnessed Frank Costello emerging as one of the most formidable and dangerous figures in the American mafia, as noted by Charlie Luciano. Despite his youth and the absence of a formal boss title, Costello's reputation for being both volatile and lethal earned him widespread recognition. During this time frame, Costello exhibited a quick and ruthless demeanor, particularly when confronted or provoked. He had a penchant for resorting to violence, readily drawing his gun and employing it with little hesitation. Whether through pistol whipping, brutal physical assaults, or more fatally taking someone's life, Costello was not one to be trifled with. Despite later suggestions that he may not have been a prolific killer, the reality is that Costello, along with Luciano and their associates, accumulated a significant number of casualties during the tumultuous periods of bootlegging wars and for survival. Carrying a gun was more than a symbolic gesture for Costello. It signified a genuine willingness to use lethal force if crossed. This demeanor persisted into his teenage years, where his dangerous reputation began to take shape, and it intensified as he entered his 20s. It's noteworthy that, over time, Costello underwent a transformation. The description of him eventually calming down and becoming more peaceful indicates a maturation in his approach. This evolution may have been influenced by various factors, including changes in the organized creamy landscape, personal experiences, or strategic considerations. Nevertheless, understanding Costello's early years as a formidable and ruthless figure provides crucial context for comprehending the trajectory of his career within the American mafia. Unlike Al Capone, who was known for using a baseball bat to administer beatings, Costello had a distinct approach. Upon hearing about Capone's brutal methods, Costello expressed his displeasure, emphasizing that only Capone engaged in killings of that nature. Costello, on the other hand, was a gunman, comfortable with dispatching adversaries by putting a couple of bullets behind their ear, casually continuing on his way without hesitation or remorse. This methodical and efficient approach to violence was Costello's preferred modus operandi, distinguishing him from the more visibly brutal tactics employed by figures like Al Capone. At this juncture, Costello had been associating with Luciano and others, cultivating a reputation as a formidable gunman. Despite prior arrests in 1908 and 1912 for assault and robbery, where he emerged unscathed, luck eluded him the third time around. In 1949, Time magazine shed light on Costello's criminal background, emphasizing the only occasion he served time in his youth. This incident marked a turning point in Frank Costello's early years, shaping the narrative of a man who would later ascend to notoriety within the criminal underworld. Time wrote in 1949, he was exposed early to the neighborhood heroes, the torpedoes who worked for Ciro Terranova, red-handed boss of the Unione Siciliana in Harlem and the Bronx. They fired his imagination. He quit school when he was 11 to sell newspapers and run a kids' crap game, a project which meant paying off the Irish cop on the beat. He soon graduated to sterner enterprise. When he was 17, he was charged with assault and robbery, but the charge was dismissed. In 1912, when he was 21, he was arrested for robbing a woman of $1,600 on the street, and again the charge was dropped. But in 1915, Gunman Francesco Castiglia, alias Frank Saverio, alias Frank Costello, was jailed and convicted of illegal possession of a pistol. Old court records describe the dark little drama, how the defendant ran from two suspicious policemen and threw his pistol into a lot, how he was caught, dragged back, and how the weapon was found. They tell of his pleas for mercy, made at first in Italian through a court interpreter, and finally in English, and they repeat the words of a forgotten judge. I have got it right from his neighbors, that he has the reputation of being a gunman, and in this particular case he had a very beautiful weapon and was prepared to do the work of a gunman. He was charged on 2 other occasions with doing the work of a gunman, and somehow or other got out of it. Now I have committed him to the penitentiary for 1 year. He served 10 months. It was the only time he ever went to prison. Standing before Judge Edward Swan, Frank Costello, then so destitute he couldn't afford a suit, appeared in denim pants. The judge, visibly incensed, proclaimed his intent to send Costello to a penitentiary for a year. Subsequently, Frank was transferred to the prison on Welfare Island, serving 10 months of the prescribed 1-year sentence. It was his well-established reputation as a gunman that landed him in jail, marking a challenging chapter in Costello's early life. Costello told his lawyer once, "That's when I realized I was stupid. Carrying a gun was like carrying a label that says, 'I'm dangerous, I'm a criminal, get me off the streets.' I made up my mind I would never pack a gun again, and I never did." Upon Frank Costello's release from prison in 1916, he found an unlikely ally also recently freed, Charlie Luciano, who had altered his name from Salvatore during his incarceration for a narcotics charge. This marked the beginning of their joint venture into organized crime. Frank wasted no time establishing legitimate enterprises, partnering with Harry Horowitz, a novelties manufacturer proposing a venture blending novelty and gambling. While the company, named the Horowitz Novelty Company, initially focused on manufacturing Cupid dolls and novelties, Costello, the astute Italian immigrant, swiftly redirected their path towards punchboards, popular gambling devices of the time, with dolls as prizes. With this venture alone, Frank was turning over an impressive $100,000. A shrewd businessman within Luciano's crew, Frank was reportedly the highest earner. Between 1916 and 1919, they expanded into small bookmaking operations, showcasing Costello's knack for numbers. In an era devoid of computers, Frank's memory was impeccable, effortlessly recalling details about inventories, sales, suppliers, and the nationwide movement of slot machines, all without a written record, relying on cryptic marks on a scratch pad. However, success was not without its pitfalls. When the Horowitz Novelty Company eventually collapsed, leaving creditors owed around $14,000, despite the book suggesting higher earnings, a lawyer involved in debt collection dismissed the debts, citing that they were owed by East Side gangsters. Protected by a bankruptcy ruling, Frank safeguarded most of his profits, propelling him forward in his business endeavors. As Time magazine delved into Costello's enterprises, they uncovered the intricacies of the Horowitz Novelty Company, shedding light on Frank's growing stature and business acumen. Time magazine wrote in 1949 he was a partner in something called the Horowitz Novelty Company, which dealt in Cupid dolls, razor blades, and punchboards. It went bankrupt, left its creditors holding the sack, was reborn as the Dainties Products Company, and boomed. He put his money into real estate, built apartments and 5-story walk-ups in Upper Manhattan and the Bronx, and with his investments hit another jackpot. In 1923, with speakeasies running in 1,000 Manhattan basements, Frank Costello threw his bankroll into the rum trade. From 1915 to 1919, Frank Costello was steadily finding his footing, learning the ropes of a world where opportunities were seized to put food on the table for families. However, the landscape of organized crime underwent a seismic shift with the introduction of a game-changing law. On January 16, 1920, the Prohibition Amendment took effect, and Frank, then 29, dubbed it a transformative moment, stating, "It was a whole new ballgame and we own the ball." This development marked a pivotal shift, a game-changer, a product once universally enjoyed by all, spanning the rich, the poor, and the middle class, found its way onto the black market. This transformation ensured that gangsters could now exert control over this commodity, solidifying their influence and laying the foundation for criminal empires. It was this evolution that shaped the modern-day mafia, and within this burgeoning realm emerged Frank Costello. At the age of 29, Costello found himself at the epicenter of this transformative moment. Alongside him were formidable figures: Luciano at 23, Meyer at 18, Benjamin Siegal at 14, Joe Adonis at 18, and Vito Genovese at 23. Each of these individuals, destined to play significant roles in the world of organized crime, stood on the cusp of a new era, catalyzed by the opportunities presented by this clandestine market. Frank Costello's journey into the heart of this burgeoning criminal empire was just beginning, setting the stage for the influential role he would come to play in the mafia's evolution. Costello strategically avoided aligning himself solely with the Italians. His marriage to a Jewish woman granted him the flexibility to navigate the diverse underworld, seamlessly interacting with Jewish and Irish gangsters, engaging in political circles, and establishing connections with key figures like Luciano and Masseria. At this juncture, Costello operated as an independent entity, recognizing that maneuvering solo had its limitations, especially with the expansive opportunities presented by the burgeoning bootlegging trade. As the bootlegging game unfolded, Costello assessed the landscape and acknowledged the necessity of choosing a side. The allure of Luciano's multi-ethnic crew, Jewish, Irish, and non-Sicilian Italians, alongside Arnold Rothstein's influence, prompted Costello to align himself with this dynamic ensemble. This collaboration laid the foundation for one of the most significant liquor bootlegging operations in history. By the mid to late 20s, Costello was heavily aligned with Luciano and Masseria. Together, Luciano, Rothstein, and Costello invested in the emerging criminal fraternity, particularly in the rising star Charlie Luciano and his outfit. This strategic move propelled them into the forefront of the bootlegging trade, surpassing traditional companies in terms of speed, efficiency, and sheer volume. In essence, they weren't just dealing with gangsters. They became the gangsters defining the landscape of the illicit liquor trade. From 1915 to 1920, a cohort including Meyer Lansky, Benjamin Siegal, Luciano, Vito Genovese, Costello, Joe Adonis, and others engaged in various lucrative ventures. Their activities ranged from occasional dealings in narcotics to participating in break-ins, robberies, and stick-ups, generating substantial income. Wisely, they directed their earnings toward diverse avenues, including gambling, bookmaking, and corruption. Pooling their accumulated wealth, these men, supported by investors like Arnold Rothstein, strategically transitioned into the burgeoning world of bootlegging. Their financial prowess and entrepreneurial spirit set the stage for a substantial expansion, as they leveraged not only their existing funds, but also sought additional capital from influential backers. This collective effort propelled them into a dominant position within the bootlegging landscape, marking a significant evolution in their criminal enterprises. Entering the 30s, this formidable group of men wielded such immense power that they played a pivotal role in securing the election of Franklin D. Roosevelt, an unprecedented game-changer. Now, shifting our focus to Frank Costello, we'll delve into the intricate tapestry of how he meticulously constructed his bootlegging operations. At the onset of the 20s, Frank Costello embarked on the colossal task of constructing his very own shipping empire. Consider the magnitude of the shipping industry today, where trillions worth of products traverse the seas globally. In the 20s, Costello entered this expansive domain with the ambition to assert dominance. He established his shipping company, crafted proprietary routes, acquired his fleet of boats, secured ports, and stationed his own cadre of men, comprising captains and sailors, across strategic locations. Costello's visionary approach extended beyond the physical infrastructure of shipping. He systematically built an intelligence network that spanned the nation and even reached across the globe. This intricate web of informants discreetly tipped him off, providing critical information about potential threats, including insights on Coast Guard movements. Astonishingly, Costello had managed to corrupt elements within the Coast Guard, turning them into willing accomplices who not only facilitated the arrival of bootlegging liquor to the shore, but also assisted in the seamless offloading onto trucks. Had Frank Costello been alive today, his pioneering efforts would likely position him as one of the wealthiest individuals at the helm of one of the world's largest shipping operations. This enduring significance is underscored by the contemporary intertwining of shipping routes with organized crime, especially in the movement of drugs through shipping containers. Costello's visionary endeavors in the 20s laid the groundwork for the strategic routes that are still utilized by organized crime entities in the present day. Costello's reach extended far beyond the traditional sources of whiskey and alcohol, like Ireland, England, and Paris. He had liquor flowing in from closer territories, strategically tapping into the production hubs of Mexico, Canada, and Cuba. The Italian mafia, previously confined to the United States, expanded its influence into neighboring countries like Canada. This marked the genesis of a colossal enterprise that both united and fragmented families across America, weaving the intricate fabric of organized crime. This expansion provided Costello with a dual advantage. Not only did he gain a legitimate source of income, albeit within the illegitimate realm, but this enterprise also gained a semblance of societal acceptance. This legitimacy enabled Costello to channel funds towards politicians, securing additional layers of protection and facilitating his involvement in other illicit activities. The role of individuals like Costello, Luciano, and their counterparts was pivotal in shaping the landscape of organized crime. Costello's unique ability to navigate political challenges became evident when Franklin D. Roosevelt turned against organized crime. Unlike Luciano, who faced significant obstacles, Costello adeptly shifted his enterprises and sought legal protection from Huey Long. The governor of Louisiana, Huey Long, a politician unafraid to challenge Roosevelt and even contend for the presidency, offered Costello invaluable protection. In return, Costello relocated his casino gambling and slot machine operations to Louisiana, particularly in New Orleans. This strategic move underscored the symbiotic relationship between organized crime and politics during this era. Prior to Prohibition, even though Costello associated with Luciano and others, he didn't consider himself part of any organized crime group. The men were merely capitalizing on opportunities to sustain themselves and their families. However, the Volstead Act altered the dynamics. Frank strengthened his ties with influential figures like Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Benjamin Siegal, Joe Adonis, Tommy L., Vito Genovese, Al Capone, and Jake Guzik, and more. Until then, America had only local gangs, but organized crime truly began with the Prohibition Amendment, creating an unprecedented demand for criminals to collaborate. Smuggling whiskey into America became a complex operation, requiring fleets of ships, convoys of trucks, warehouses, and even island bases in Newfoundland. Armed planes eventually entered the scene to navigate the flow of illegal alcohol, past the stern guardians of the envisioned saloonless nation. Crime reached unprecedented popularity, forging alliances so tight that blood bonds were formed. Italian families, initially brought together by necessity, later solidified into crime families that endured for over 50 to 60 years, generating billions. Frank Costello wasted no time seizing this opportunity, diving headfirst into the world of prohibition with hungry young men like Luciano and Meyer Lansky at his side. Surrounded by willing financiers, including the likes of Arnold Rothstein and Ben Franklin, Frank navigated the new landscape of crime that emerged with prohibition. Embarking on a new learning curve, Frank Costello found himself immersed in uncharted waters. Sea battles, undocumented in the annals of history, alongside Lord Nelson, unfolded between armed smuggling ships and Coast Guard cutters, occasionally joined by seaplanes armed with machine guns. Costello adeptly navigated this perilous realm, bribing some Coast Guardsmen, but unable to sway them all. Those who remained incorruptible wreaked havoc on his operations. Amidst this tumultuous venture, Frank received grim news from his brother. One of his ships had collided with an iceberg. Calmly, Frank responded, "Too bad. I can't buy the iceberg." This business alone promised the potential to generate millions. However, a pressing question loomed over the Italian community involved in bootlegging. Who would lead and control this burgeoning world of organized crime? With gangs and families forming to exploit the lucrative bootlegging trade, a wave of underworld wars commenced. Many, preying on each other and hijacking truck convoys, sought to secure a piece of the gold rush. In Chicago, Al Capone reigned supreme, imposing blood terror with ruthless violence. Frank, inherently averse to such brutality, witnessed a contrasting scenario in New York. Gangsters aligned with Costello, like Dutch Schultz and others such as Arnold Rothstein, the underworld financier, Legs Diamond and Mad Dog Cole, operated independently, and some were managed by Arnold Rothstein and the likes. Amidst this chaos, Frank Costello emerged alongside a new crop of unknown criminals, including a name that would resonate: Luciano. In the historical tapestry of organized crime, each figure can be likened to a unique character, each assuming a distinct role. In my perspective, Luciano emerges as the architect, crafting the blueprint for organized crime. Meyer Lansky, on the other hand, assumes the role of the meticulous accountant, ensuring the financial intricacies of the operation are sound. Meanwhile, Frank Costello stands as the Prime Minister of organized crime. In this realm, gaining the title of Prime Minister isn't a political feat. It's earned through the votes and recognition of fellow members, capos, bosses, made men, essentially everyone involved in the criminal enterprise. Frank Costello, having been voted into this esteemed position, takes the helm of organized crime and extends his influence into the world of politics. Understanding the Italian mafia requires acknowledging their unique ability to transcend boundaries that no other crime group has conquered. This exceptional feat is precisely why our focus remains on them. While Chicago boasted brilliant minds like Jake Guzik operating within its realm, it is the intricate dynamics and leadership of figures like Luciano, Lansky, and Costello that continue to captivate our exploration of organized crime history. Throughout history, politicians have consistently exhibited a penchant for greed, seeking fame and public attention. However, the era of prohibition marked a significant upswing in this avarice for Frank Costello and the Italian mafia, as well as other organized crime members. Their collaboration during Prohibition fueled not only the greed for wealth, but also the desire for political influence. Women, gambling, favors, and lucrative contracts became tools at their disposal. For politicians aligning with the mob, the rewards extended beyond the conclusion of their political careers. If a politician proved to be effective, the mob would actively support the extension of their political influence. Alternatively, those politicians who were merely popular figures found themselves offered seats on various boards controlled by the mob. This orchestrated corruption was orchestrated by the shrewd planning of Frank Costello, working in tandem with individuals like Jake Guzik and many others in and around organized crime. As these elements slowly started to coalesce, Luciano emerged, spearheading the creation of the New York Mafia. His collaboration with Meyer Lansky, Benjamin Siegal, and connections like Joe Adonis became instrumental in this intricate web. Frank Costello, leveraging his strategic foresight, prioritized his involvement in politics, strategically positioning himself where he recognized the need for influence and power. The synergy between figures like Luciano, Lansky, and Costello set the stage for a new era in organized crime. Around 1919, Costello pooled together whatever funds he could muster and invested in one of the burgeoning outfits led by Luciano. Recognizing the need to establish his own identity, pioneer, and carve out a unique path, Costello delved into the realm of what had recently been deemed illegal alcohol. He positioned himself as a trailblazer, venturing into new territories such as Scotland, Ireland, and Newfoundland to procure alcohol for the American market. Costello struck deals with English and European distilleries, anticipating the eventual legalization of alcohol. His foresight led him to control legitimate stakes in various distilleries across Europe and England. However, in 1919 or 1920, Costello transitioned into the role of a bootlegger, a smuggler, one determined to excel in his craft. Pioneering the art of trafficking goods, Costello became part of a historical tradition that stretched back to the days of pirates, smuggling a variety of goods, people, and narcotics. What set this era apart was the unprecedented demand for a product consumed by everyone, from the rich to the middle class and the poor. In response, figures like Frank Costello, backed by the funding of individuals like Arnold Rothstein, and with the support of influential figures like Luciano, stepped into the forefront to fulfill this demand in a way that history had never witnessed before. Costello's ingenuity extended to inventive strategies, notably exploiting the 3-mile limit. Aware that certain ship captains hesitated to bring their vessels into docks due to the illegal nature of their cargo. Fearing hefty fines, revoked licenses, or even imprisonment, Costello capitalized on this predicament. Ships would anchor just beyond the 3-mile limit, avoiding legal trouble. Costello, seizing the opportunity, mobilized small, nimble skiffs, swift boats, and swiftly approached these anchored liners. His operatives would transfer the illicit goods onto these small skiffs, skillfully evading capture with their speed. Essentially, these were early versions of the speedboats famously employed in the 70s and 80s by certain Colombians during cocaine dumps off the 3-mile limit. The swift return of these boats to shore, laden with valuable cargo, became a hallmark of Costello's innovative approach, a blueprint that would later be adapted and refined in subsequent decades. Frank Costello's global influence extended beyond his involvement with European distilleries, British distilleries in Scotland, and Ireland. As the 30s unfolded, Costello evolved into an international figure in the realm of organized crime. His expansive network of contacts spanned the globe, surpassing those of Luciano and other mobsters. Costello's reputation preceded him, earning recognition not only in the United States, but also in countries like France and England. During the 20s and 30s, Costello frequented these international destinations, cultivating connections that reached far and wide. His stature as the Prime Minister of organized crime was underscored by the establishment of what could be considered embassies, representative outposts that mirrored the structure of organized crime in various corners of the world. Costello's far-reaching influence and well-known persona solidified his status as a truly global figure in the intricate landscape of organized crime. In the narrative shared by Frank Costello's lawyer, the tale unfolds in 1921, when Costello embarked on a northbound journey aboard an old freighter bound for Newfoundland. His destination, St. Pierre, the capital of the Miquelon Islands, off the coast of Newfoundland. Costello strategically chose St. Pierre due to its geographical positioning outside the jurisdictions of both the United States and Canada. This small French possession remained the sole remnant of the once mighty North American empire, untouched by American and Canadian influences. Braving the elements on the deck of the ship, Costello, donned in a red sweater, grey slacks, and boots, reveled in the frigid sea breeze and salt spray. Despite the ship's 2-day voyage and the tumultuous ocean, he found solace in the rhythmic dance of the waves and the vast expanse of the horizon. Perhaps, he mused, his Calabrian ancestors had a connection to the sea. The captain, a rotund Dutchman who diverted his usual European route to accommodate Costello and his men, joined him on the bridge. As they approached St. Pierre, the captain handed Costello binoculars, anticipating his reaction to the sight. However, the initial sweep yielded nothing but the boundless sea. With a wry smile, Costello remarked that it wouldn't be New York. The captain chuckled, expressing skepticism about the three men's interest in the sparsely populated island, with only around 300 inhabitants. Curiosity had driven the captain to inquire about their unconventional destination, speculating about buried treasure or sunken ships. When Frank denied any treasure hunting and affirmed their business purpose, the captain was left puzzled. The mysteriousness of their intent lingered, and as the ship ploughed through the waves, the captain attempted to unravel the enigma. His efforts were met with a stern warning from one of Costello's associates on the bridge. Against the backdrop of fierce North Atlantic winds, the granite masses of the Miquelon Islands emerged, signaling their arrival. The ship navigated toward a desolate port, surrounded by crumbling piers and weathered fishing vessels. The village ascended from the port, and a tattered French flag fluttered atop a government building. As the freighter entered the sheltered west side of Saint-Pierre, Frank Costello observed the scene with fascination, his anticipation building for the uncharted business dealings that lay ahead. After settling the captain's fee, Frank strolled down the gangway to encounter a young man clad in a fur-lined coat. Greeting him, the man remarked, "The mayor is expecting you, Mr. Costello. Your letter's been on his desk a week, and he still doesn't understand it." "Cases of what?" Frank maintained a mysterious smile, reserving his explanation solely for the mayor. The pact forged with the mayor aimed to enrich Saint-Pierre, offering $2 per case of liquor. By the conclusion of Prohibition, over 2 million cases would traverse this petite island. Frank, acknowledging that no monument in America or Italy would honor him, whimsically believed that, if a monument ever stood in his name, it would be in Saint-Pierre, a place where he garnered more warmth than the savior. In a matter of weeks, this North Atlantic rocky outpost, previously inhabited by a handful of fishermen, metamorphosed into a thriving and prosperous port. Frank affectionately referred to it as a boom town, accentuating, with once in a while, some real booms. The influx of rugged individuals from the ships, donning grey fedoras in the frigid North Atlantic winds, signaled the transformation. These newcomers, equipped with shaky sea legs, holstered guns, and a businesslike demeanor, turned the island into a bustling hub. Warehouses were erected, piers reinforced, loading equipment procured, and workers transported to the island. Amazing and unconventional fleet, Frank saw the harbour welcome ancient tramp ships, rust-streaked coasters, fishing schooners, and various vessels deemed seaworthy enough for a single journey. Many had languished in derelict shipyards, but were resurrected to meet the demands of Prohibition. Big Bill Dwyer joined the venture, adding his fleet to Frank's, resulting in a convergence of underworld characters and a lively atmosphere. Saloons, brothels, and the vibrant presence of prostitutes lining the ship rails greeted incoming vessels with a cacophony of steam sirens, whistles, and bells. In an intriguing twist to this venture, the French Corsican Mafia staked its claim in the same territory, utilizing it as a strategic launchpad for a multifaceted array of operations. Their activities ranged from gun smuggling, weapons trafficking, human trafficking, and sex trafficking to narcotics trafficking. The year 1919 marked a pivotal moment when a new opportunity presented itself to these gangsters, a foray into the lucrative world of bootlegging. This shift in criminal enterprises not only united various underworld factions globally, but also opened up a colossal market. However, to gain entry into this lucrative market, one had to navigate through the emerging powerhouses in organized crime, which included the Irish Mafia, which controlled parts of America and its politics, as well as the Jewish Mafia and the new strong powerhouse that would rule over it all, the Italian-American Mafia, creating a symbiotic relationship. In the 1920s, the intricate threads of this interconnected web began to weave together, and at the forefront of these developments stood Costello. Frank Costello's prominence in this evolving landscape was not merely happenstance, rather, it stemmed from his remarkable ability to pioneer into uncharted territories and countries, demonstrating a willingness to embrace new challenges. This forward-thinking approach catapulted him ahead of his time, establishing him as one of the most influential and well-connected gangsters in America. The French Corsican Mafia extended its reach to another key operational hub, New Orleans, Louisiana. This expansion was particularly strategic, given the French Corsican Mafia's significant involvement in narcotics operations, a trend that gained momentum in the 40s and 50s. Concurrently, the French government was leveraging these criminal networks to counter separatist movements in African countries, notably Algiers. Both the French Corsican Mafia and the Italian Mafia found themselves under the protective umbrella of the CIA during the 50s and 60s. Frank Costello, a trailblazer in exploring new territories, emerged as one of the first individuals to establish alliances with these influential groups. As the mid-20th century unfolded, these alliances would evolve, paving the way for strategic moves into Europe post-World War II, aligning the French Corsican Mafia and its Italian counterpart in coordinated endeavors alongside the geopolitical interests of the time. Charlie Luciano emphasized that he and his associates, particularly Costello, avoided conflict with the FCM due to their dangerous and volatile nature. In 1923, Luciano's arrest and subsequent release, facilitated by handing over heroin, highlighted the risks associated with narcotics dealings. Notably, had he been part of the FCM, such cooperation would likely have led to his immediate execution. Luciano navigated these risks to climb the ranks, while Costello, focused on pioneering ventures, steered clear of narcotics and internal warfare. Costello, being older, connected with European organized crime groups, such as the Irish, FCM, Cuban and Jewish Mafia, as well as other crime groups or businesses who knew what Costello was doing but looked the other way. This led to the birth of the Irish Republican Army, funded by bootlegging profits. Post-World War I, trained and daring individuals, coupled with the Great Depression's economic hardships, created an environment ripe for organized crime expansion. Costello seized opportunities, providing financial support to politicians domestically and internationally, ensuring smooth operations and territorial control. By the 30s, these men held sway over America, Cuba, Canada, South America, Europe, including London, Paris, Lisbon, the Middle East, and more. Costello, known as the Reasonable Man or the Prime Minister of the Underworld, facilitated dealings and negotiations. St. Pierre Island became a hub for Costello's operations, hosting business meetings and serving as a central location for underworld affairs. Costello's significant contributions to the island led him to express that if any monument were to be built in his honor, it should be in St. Pierre. However, when he departed, a major economic downturn struck the area, halting bootlegging activities but continuing operations in narcotics and other ventures. With St. Pierre secured as his base, Frank shifted his focus to the intricate logistics of transporting liquor from the British Isles to the US, navigating through the vigilant eyes of the Coast Guard, and transporting the contraband to warehouses presented multifaceted challenges. The bootlegging era witnessed two distinct phases. Before 1924, the Coast Guard, equipped with aging patrol boats, struggled to match the speed and agility of bootleggers' vessels. Frank, along with other bootleggers, deployed the nimble Jersey skiffs, known as the Sunset Fleet, to outmaneuver the Coast Guard's sluggish patrols. The Coast Guard faced public disdain, labeled as pirates by New York newspapers, exacerbating the challenges along the liquor transportation route. When a Coast Guard cutter attempted to intercept a bootlegging boat, resulting in injuries, public sentiment flared with anger. The reality was that America harbored a deep affection for the whiskey transported by the impressive fleet, swiftly christened Rum Row by the press. Extending from Chesapeake Bay in the south to Montauk Point in the north, Rum Row predominantly congregated near the New Jersey Highlands, strategically positioned for the approaches to the port of New York. Confronted by public animosity and the lack of initiative from local authorities, the Coast Guard before 1924 did little to impede the transfer of liquor from Rum Row to the shore. Examining the economics of bootlegging sheds light on the significance of this almost free opportunity to flout the law during the prosperous years. Scotch, originally priced at $8 per case at its port of origin in the British Isles, commanded a hefty $65 if purchased from a rum row vessel. The final cost for the bootlegger on American soil rose to $120 per case. However, the bootleggers sought even greater profits. Each bottle of Scotch underwent dilution, with 1 part liquor and 3 parts grain alcohol and distilled water. Ultimately, a case initially procured for $8 on the other side of the Atlantic yielded around $400 for the bootlegger stateside. Notably, numerous shiploads contained as many as 20,000 cases of uncut whiskey. Frank's rapid accumulation of wealth reached a point where he found himself lending money to Arnold Rothstein, a departure from his earlier role as a borrower from the Brain. His corporate domain extended from St. Pierre in the north to Philadelphia in the south. The diverse fleet, ranging from tramp steamers to repurposed luxury yachts, along with fleets of Jersey skiffs, facilitated runs onto beaches. Trucks incessantly traversed from these landing points to the warehouses. Notably, Frank introduced a novel dimension to bootlegging that would astonish the courtroom in 1926. Seaplanes providing air coverage formed what could be termed the air wing of Frank's defense. In the 20s, Frank Costello embarked on a massive logistics operation centered around bootlegging, ensuring the transportation of illicit products to America. Luciano, Meyer Lansky, Joe Adonis, and other associates joined forces under Frank's leadership. As the operation unfolded, stories of perilous journeys, particularly in transporting goods from Britain to America, emerged. The criminal aspect of shipping and transportation, birthed by the demand for specific goods, endures in contemporary organized crime. Shipping companies continue to be instrumental in smuggling operations, with organized crime leveraging them to move illicit goods across countries. This long-standing involvement extends to a myriad of contraband, including people, drugs, weapons, and government dealings. The Central Intelligence Agency itself has been entwined with organized crime in these ventures. Therefore, shipping stands as a cornerstone of organized crime, with gangsters pioneering investments in the industry, particularly during the significant bailouts of major shipping companies in 1929. As organized crime tightened its grip on the shipping industries, they not only learned the intricacies of the trade, but also asserted complete dominance. By 1958, these men had transformed from pioneers navigating the industry to rulers who managed it with an unparalleled understanding. Their dominance in the shipping industry translated into staggering profits, reaching hundreds of millions. Regardless of incoming shipments, their ability to dispatch men to pilfer shipping containers provided an additional revenue stream. This dual approach ensured that both ends of the operation remained lucrative, sustaining contentment among the street-level operatives. The spectrum of their operations extended to more serious endeavors, such as weapons trafficking. It might seem unconventional for the mafia, but consider this. How did someone like Castro, tucked away in the jungle, amass the weaponry needed to rebel against Batista and seize control of Cuba? The answer lies in the proficiency of the best shippers in the world, organized crime, particularly the Italian-American mafia. Their involvement in weapons trafficking allowed them to influence significant geopolitical events, showcasing the extent of their reach and impact. The plot thickens when we consider that the Central Intelligence Agency, CIA, backed Castro, providing him with funds. With the CIA's money, Castro turned to the Italian-American mafia for weapons, showcasing the intricate connections between international politics and organized crime. In certain instances, the CIA's and the mafia's strategy involved supporting both Castro and Batista simultaneously, aiming for the best of both worlds, though this approach ultimately proved unsuccessful. This historical narrative underscores the pivotal role of the shipping industry, masterminded by figures like Costello. Without efficient shipping, the mafia's extensive business operations wouldn't have thrived. The legacy of this influence persisted through history, exemplified by figures like Tony Provenzano, who extorted enormous sums from shipping industries, causing financial ruin. Even today, the mention of Provenzano's name in parts of New Jersey elicits fear, a testament to the lasting impact and damage he left in his wake. During the 20s, a significant portion of the elite and industrious class had their fortunes tied up in alcohol. The advent of prohibition ushered in immense financial ruin for these individuals. Seizing an opportunity in this economic downturn, many turned to organized crime for financial reprieve. Additionally, countries like Britain, not particularly fond of America at the time, played a role in facilitating this new venture. The anonymity of figures like Costello allowed them to move discreetly, with people regarding them as honest businessmen with ample resources. Costello even orchestrated the shipping of products directly to Newfoundland, disguising their operations as legitimate, and despite the authorities being aware of their illicit activities, they chose not to intervene. In the ascent to wealth and influence amid Prohibition, Costello forged an informal alliance with Joseph P. Kennedy, a fellow bootlegger from Boston. Kennedy, relocating to New York after facing rejection in his hometown, delved into the liquor trade during Prohibition, clandestinely carrying on his family's legacy. Costello claimed to have played a pivotal role in Kennedy's financial success, a sentiment echoed by other sources. According to Costello, he helped Kennedy get rich. The intricate dynamics of their partnership were further illuminated by Doc Stracke, a mafia figure who hinted at a falling out between the two. Joseph Bonanno, a mafia boss, affirmed the Costello-Kennedy connection in his autobiography A Man of Honor. However, as Prohibition drew to a close, their paths diverged. Post-repeal, both Costello and Kennedy ventured into the lucrative Scotch market, setting up competing distributorships in New York, a trend mirrored by Lucky Luciano and Meyer Lansky. Costello's alliance distributors handled King's Ransom and House of Lords Scotch, while Kennedy's Somerset Liquors distributed Haig and Haig's, Dewar's Scotch, and Gordon's Gin. By the mid-30s, a fierce rivalry had taken root between the two, marked by intense competition. This competition is widely believed to have fueled the Kennedy family's profound animosity toward the mafia, a sentiment that would later surface during President Kennedy's administration. The seeds of this contentious relationship were sown in the violent landscape of their bootlegging rivalry. Russell Bufalino, another prominent mob boss, asserted that the relationship between Costello and Joseph P. Kennedy was highly profitable. Bufalino claimed that for every bottle of Scotch entering America, Kennedy made $1. This revelation, shared with individuals like Frank Sheeran, offered insights into the deep-seated connections between Kennedy and organized crime. Joseph P. Kennedy, known for his extensive ties with the mafia, had not only a lucrative partnership with Costello, but was also among the select few supporters of Franklin D. Roosevelt. This early backing paved the way for Kennedy to become the ambassador to Great Britain within the Roosevelt administration. However, Kennedy's fortunes took a turn due to his sympathies toward the Nazis. Despite his previous influential role, his attempt to persuade Great Britain to surrender to the Nazis backfired, and Britain's victory, especially after the game-changing event of Pearl Harbor, altered the political landscape. Post-Pearl Harbor, Joseph P. Kennedy distanced himself from the Roosevelt administration and withdrew from the political scene. It was only through his sons, particularly John Kennedy, that he later returned to the political arena. The complex dynamics of Kennedy's involvement with organized crime and his subsequent political trajectory underscore the intricate intersections between power, influence, and historical events during this era. Later, we'll explore the historical connection between Joseph P. Kennedy and Costello, as Kennedy's involvement with organized crime played a significant role. Notably, when Kennedy sought help from organized crime, Frank Costello was dealing with tax and internal issues, making him unable to assist Kennedy. Consequently, Kennedy turned to figures like Sam Giancana, Russell Bufalino, and others to secure their support in his bid for the White House. Frank Costello, at the forefront of innovation, spearheaded the mafia's entry into the shipping industry, placing a firm grip on its operations. His strategic move laid the groundwork for the next phase, wherein Meyer Lansky collaborated with the Benjamin Siegal transportation network to distribute the product to the market. Luciano's role followed suit, organizing the industry to ensure smooth operations. Each member of this criminal consortium also navigated new challenges, including delving into the realm of politics, a facet we'll explore later. Liquor companies worldwide sought the expertise of figures like Frank Costello as they grappled with the loss of a massive market during Prohibition. Recognizing the untapped potential in this market, companies spanning France, England, Scotland, Ireland, Spain, Italy, Germany, and even Russia approached Frank. Positioned as a middleman, he assumed control of their operations, ensuring the seamless flow of their diverse range of alcoholic products into the lucrative American market. The array was vast, including beer, wine, whiskey, vodka, rum, gin, tequila, brandy, cognac, sake, absinthe, liqueurs, mead, cider, pisco, aquavit, soju, bourbon, scotch, margarita, and more. During the 20s, Costello not only offered the mafia his services in procuring products abroad, but also ensured their efficient delivery to the shore, where Meyer and his team came into play. Luciano, in turn, orchestrated the organizational structure to facilitate this flow. However, the multifaceted nature of their operations required constant adaptation, including forays into politics. Costello, in laying the cornerstone for shipping and transportation, simultaneously secured his influence in acquiring liquor licenses, solidifying his strategic position within the burgeoning criminal landscape. The process was rife with dangers, with bandits ready to seize shipments along the way. During the early 20s, Luciano and his mentor faced challenges as their loads were targeted by adversaries. This led to a surge in violence, with bloodshed becoming a common occurrence. The intensity of these conflicts can be likened to the cocaine boom of the 80s or 70s, where the Colombian, Mexicans, and Cuban cartels started to flourish, resulting in a significant loss of life. The introduction of Prohibition in the 20s triggered all-out warfare among Italian families. Despite their previous unity against racism, the allure of a new, highly valuable product surpassed even the solidarity fostered by the fight against discrimination. This product, consumed by individuals from all walks of life, rich, poor, and middle class, became the catalyst for a fierce struggle for dominance among these organized crime factions. Frank extensively traveled the globe in his relentless pursuit of alcohol, venturing into new countries. Through these journeys, he evolved into a man of culture, demonstrating a profound love for embracing diverse customs, trying new things, and engaging with people from various backgrounds. This rich cultural exposure played a pivotal role in shaping him into a more refined individual and a skilled practitioner of corruption. Frank's genuine interest in learning about different societies and connecting with people of varied experiences contributed to his personal growth. This broad understanding of individuals from all walks of life, coupled with his open-mindedness, not only enriched him as a person, but also elevated his expertise in navigating the intricate world of corruption. Frank's ability to relate to and comprehend the motivations of people from diverse backgrounds became a valuable asset in his role as a shrewd operator within the realm of organized crime. To truly grasp the intricacies of the mafia, one must delve into the art of political corruption. While politicians have always been motivated by greed, Frank Costello elevated this avarice to new heights. He hearkened back to his childhood days, realizing that protection could be bought, even from running small gambling games on street sidewalks where he'd discreetly pay off the local cop on the beat. As Frank's influence expanded, so did the scale of corruption. His foray into the political arena led him to conquer the formidable Tammany Hall, a political stronghold pivotal in funding Democrats and swaying elections. Though ostensibly a cornerstone of the community, Tammany Hall's dark heart pumped corruption, and Frank deftly manipulated it. Tammany Hall, once a powerful political machine, played a crucial role in shaping New York City politics throughout much of the 19th and early 20th centuries. Initially established as a social club, it evolved into a democratic political juggernaut. Its ability to mobilize voters, control nominations, and sway elections was unparalleled. The infamous Boss Tweed era marked a zenith of corruption, with Tweed's eventual downfall signaling Tammany Hall's decline. Despite progressive era reforms curbing political corruption, Tammany Hall maintained some influence into the 30s and 40s. The Great Depression provided an opportune backdrop for political machines, including Tammany, to capitalize on economic distress and secure support. In this political landscape, figures like James J. Walker in the 30s and the formidable Frank Costello in the 20s and 30s emerged. Frank, a powerful mobster with political connections, utilized Tammany Hall's protective cloak to orchestrate significant machinations. In my new documentary, I elucidate how the mafia, under Costello's guidance, wielded newspapers, unions, and other resources to control elections. Mastering the manipulation of billboards for political messaging and employing intimidation tactics within their own communities, they ensured votes swung in their favor. Costello, a virtuoso in this art of political control, mastered it through subtle handshakes, creating an intricate web of influence. Yet, as I explore in the documentary, other more brutish figures would employ different means to achieve similar ends, unveiling the diverse strategies within the dark tapestry of political corruption orchestrated by the mafia. Frank engaged in candid conversations with his lawyer, George Wolfe, discussing the intricate details of the activities surrounding bootlegging. In these discussions, Frank shared some wild and captivating stories that left a lasting impact on George Wolfe. Inspired by these tales, George Wolfe expressed his thoughts and experiences in poetic form within his book. The narratives and anecdotes from Frank added a compelling and vivid dimension to George Wolfe's literary work, capturing the essence of the daring exploits and challenges involved in the world of bootlegging during that era. Among the captivating tales that Frank Costello loved to share, many revolved around his passion for sailing, boats, and the adventurous spirit akin to pirates. Frank found joy in the art of navigating the seas and building trafficking routes, turning his love for sailing into a lucrative venture. Just as Meyer Lansky had a penchant for numbers and excelled in the realm of accounting, Luciano specialized in logistics, showcasing his prowess in orchestrating intricate operations. Costello's expertise lay in the world of sailing and crafting effective routes for the transport of goods. Their individual passions seamlessly merged with their illicit endeavors, creating a unique synergy that fueled their success in the underworld. These stories, steeped in adventure and ambition, not only reflected Frank's love for his chosen industry, but also provided insights into the diverse skills that each figure brought to the table in their pursuit of organized crime. Frank Costello openly regaled his posh circle with captivating tales at the dinner table, weaving narratives of high-sea adventures and the audacious world of bootlegging. Much like Luciano, who would share his stories to captivate the attention of certain individuals, Costello strategically unfolded his tales during social gatherings. These dinner-table discussions became a platform for him to share his exploits in bringing liquor into America, painting vivid pictures of daring voyages and clandestine operations. In the refined ambience of his social circle, Costello skillfully articulated his distaste stories, offering a glimpse into the clandestine world of organized crime. His anecdotes, much like Luciano's charming narratives, served to capture the imagination and curiosity of his audience, creating an aura of intrigue around his adventurous exploits. Through these shared stories, Costello solidified his standing among his esteemed friends, turning tales of illicit activities into a captivating and almost mythical aspect of his persona. Here are some of the stories he told his lawyer. Under the midnight veil, fog snaked across the waters surrounding Montauk, Long Island, as the Nancy, one of Frank's freighters, inched cautiously toward Rum Row, harboring 10,000 cases of scotch and cognac. The foghorn's intermittent blasts reverberated through the ship, disturbing Joe Calandra, the leader of the armed crew Frank had stationed on board. Unable to ignore the nerve-jangling horn any longer, Joe emerged from his bunk, hastily donned slacks and a sweater, and ascended to the cramped officer's wardroom for a respite with a cup of coffee. The second mate, prepping to take over the watch on the bridge, occupied the room. Annoyed by the persistent foghorn, Joe vented his frustration to the mate, a large Swede with scrutinizing blue eyes. Despite harboring trust issues with the mate, Joe dismissed it, confident in his ability to handle any trouble. The mate explained the necessity of the foghorn due to the limited visibility, emphasizing the perilous 10-mile swim to Montauk. Joe, with a hint of sarcasm, acknowledged the potential dangers. While in the galley pouring himself a black cup of coffee, Joe was interrupted by a seaman who urgently informed him of the captain's summons to the bridge. Puzzled by the Coast Guard's hail in international waters, Joe hastily returned to his room, waking his companions, Mike Gawler and Al Lazari, the other two guards. Armed with a .45 in a navy belt and holster and a submachine gun, Joe headed back toward the ladder leading to the bridge, rallying his fellow guards. As Joe ascended to the bridge, the mighty engines of the ship fell silent. On reaching the bridge, the captain, peering over the rail, apprised Joe of the approaching Coast Guard cutter. Binoculars in hand, Joe identified the grey patrol boat and its officers, signaling them through a megaphone. With defiance, Joe rejected their approach, seized the captain's megaphone, and directed the ship to get underway. The cutter altered its course, homing in on the ship. The captain explained the Coast Guard's presence, citing their location outside the international limit. Unconvinced, Joe urged the captain to keep moving. However, the cutter, after a brief encounter, veered away and vanished into the fog. Back on the bridge, Joe confronted the captain, who warned him of impending trouble. The cutter reappeared, trailing them closely. A gunshot echoed, and Joe witnessed the captain's retreat into the wheelhouse. Grabbing binoculars, Joe observed the bow-mounted 1-pound gun on the cutter firing, damaging the ship. The captain ordered the engines to stop, issued a take cover alert, and the cutter positioned itself alongside once more. Furious, Joe stormed into the wheelhouse, where his fellow guards were present. Exasperated, he struck the captain, accusing the Coast Guard of being imposters. As the cutter approached, hooks and rope ladders were thrown over, enabling dozens of pirates to board. Joe, asserting control, orchestrated a counterattack, with his armed guards positioned on the bridge. Shots were fired, hitting one of the pirates, while Joe continued to resist. The situation escalated when explosives hurled from below ripped the bridge apart, leaving Joe wounded and the pirates taking control. A day later, in a hospital bed, Joe relayed the grim news to Frank. They had lost 10,000 cases to the pirates. Yet Frank, ever resourceful, found opportunity in adversity, noting the potential of having bootleggers masquerade as the Coast Guard, a tactic he would later employ himself. In the clandestine realm of illicit goods trafficking, particularly involving prohibited substances such as cocaine and heroin, a dark and perilous world unfolds. These clandestine operations, often referred to as narco-trafficking, are marked by intense battles, whether waged on the streets or at sea. The participants, often narco-traffickers, engage in fierce shootouts, resulting in individuals going missing under mysterious circumstances, or bodies appearing on the streets, serving as ominous messages to others. In the shadowy landscape of smuggling, specifically dealing with illegal goods, it has evolved into a multi-billion-dollar market in the contemporary world. The emergence of this vast market can be traced back to the era of Prohibition. Before Prohibition, the illicit activities on the black market were not as extensive or lucrative. What Prohibition did was give rise to a burgeoning industry where the risks were deemed worthwhile, as the potential rewards amounted to millions. The focal point of this lucrative trade became the liquor industry. Remarkably, the liquor trade underwent a transformation, akin to the contemporary cocaine trade, characterized by extreme danger and entanglement with gangsters, yet offering immense financial rewards. Prohibition acted as a catalyst, propelling this once underground industry into a high-stakes, high-reward market, creating a parallel with the hazardous dynamics of today's illegal substance trade. Costello, a pioneer in unconventional warfare, emerged as one of the initial players in this clandestine battleground. His focus, however, was exclusively on the liquor trade. Unlike the later eras marked by the prevalence of heroin and cocaine, during Costello's time, the demand for these substances was not as pronounced. It was only after the Second World War, particularly during the Vietnam War, that the demand for heroin, and later the boom of the cocaine era in the 70s and 80s, truly took hold. Frankly laid out this historical trajectory, particularly highlighting the dumping of cocaine within the 3-mile limit. While contemporary drug trafficking employs more sophisticated methods, it's essential to recognize the profound transformation in the shipping industry since the 30s and 40s. Today, shipping stands as one of the world's largest industries. With the sheer volume of containers arriving in each country, comprehensive scanning becomes an impractical task. Consequently, a significant amount manages to slip through. In this intricate world, successful operations necessitate the orchestration of numerous components. Various departments handle logistics, payoffs, information, and bribery, ensuring seamless operations. Costello, at the helm of this burgeoning industry, must have commanded a vast workforce with thousands under his employment. Operating from the heart of New York, Manhattan, he collaborated with figures like Luciano and Meyer Lansky. Together, they expanded their influence beyond shipping, delving into gambling operations, unions, and diverse revenue streams. This multifaceted approach enabled them to accumulate substantial wealth, subsequently invested in acquiring political protection. Frank's role as the linchpin responsible for bringing in their products, coupled with Luciano and his cohorts' efforts, led to the establishment of a colossal empire. This intricate dance between illicit activities, economic expansion, and political maneuvering underscored the complex web that Costello navigated to solidify his place in the organized crime landscape. Many shipping companies underwent changes in ownership, with numerous transactions involving acquisitions and sales. However, beneath the surface, the roots of many of these enterprises can be traced back to organized crime. The intricate web of ownership changes often masks the true origins of these companies, concealing the influence of organized crime entities. Similarly, in the realm of trucking companies in America, a similar pattern emerges. While ownership may have shifted through sales and purchases, peeling back the layers reveals the hidden roots of organized crime behind some of these operations. The connections between seemingly legitimate businesses and their organized crime origins underscore the enduring influence of these illicit networks across various industries, shaping the complex underbelly of the business world. Frank Costello often shared anecdotes about his business operations, particularly the crucial task of ensuring the smooth transportation and delivery of his products to the market. Overseeing the transportation side of things were Benjamin Siegal and Meyer Lansky. In this realm, they formed the Book and Meyer gang. Benjamin Siegal, often reading shotgun and acting as a protector of the goods, had recently gained Frank Costello's trust. Costello spoke with admiration about Siegal, highlighting a particular story from the past. At the young age of 19, Benjamin Siegal had managed to earn the respect not only of Costello, but also of many other influential mobsters. This tale became a testament to Siegal's early prowess and the regard in which he was held within the criminal underworld. On the night of October 29, 1924, the immense Ford truck rolled through the dark towards Hoboken. Seated next to the driver was a vigilant guard, steadfastly holding a .38 in his lap, with a submachine gun resting on the floor at his feet. In the truck's cargo compartment were the hams of Scotch. Large burlap bags lined with straw, serving as vessels for the bottles when transferred to the skiffs. The limited space in the back accommodated Tony Rennie, another guard armed with a pistol and a Tommy gun. With road hijackings becoming increasingly common, each trip carried the potential for a firefight. Tony had already faced 3 such encounters, achieving success in one, being restrained in another, and sustaining an arm injury in the third. Despite his wife's concerns, the allure of the $500 per trip payout, allowing him to work 7 nights a week, proved irresistible. Tony's primary apprehension centered around the guard in front, a tough young recruit from Brooklyn. In the truck's cab, the guard, named Bugsy Siegal, exuded confidence as he gazed steadily ahead, eager to demonstrate his capabilities. 5 minutes later, Bugsy seized the opportunity as the truck approached a road blockade set by hijackers. Positioned strategically on a straight stretch of road, the hijackers inadvertently created an advantage for Bugsy. The driver slammed on the brakes, the truck shuddering to a stop, and Bugsy ordered, "Back it up, back it up." As the van skidded, Bugsy, armed with a Tommy gun, leaped into the woods just as gunfire erupted. Chaos ensued, with Rennie being hit, and Bugsy's quest to obtain the flare gun to signal Costello's cars intensified. Despite adversaries surrounding him, Bugsy skillfully navigated the terrain, using the flare gun to neutralize the threat. When Costello's men arrived, Bugsy, a 19-year-old kid, stood guard over the hijackers, showcasing his mettle. Tony Rennie, surviving the ordeal, treated Bugsy with respect, as did others who recognized the young guard's valor. Bugsy, a pivotal member of the Bugs and Meyer gang, frequently employed by Frank, forged a lasting friendship with a quiet and intelligent associate named Lansky, who would remain a friend of Frank's for years to come. In the current context, Meyer Lansky played a pivotal role as one of Luciano's key associates. Lansky, recognizing the future potential of the Italian organizational structure within organized crime, particularly Luciano's visionary approach, became a crucial figure in Luciano's circle. Luciano's outfit was notably diverse, with a significant presence of Jewish gangsters, including notable figures such as Dutch Schultz, Longie Zwillman, Meyer Lansky, Benjamin Siegal, and others. Red Levine, a close Jewish friend of Luciano, was not only a trusted confidant, but also a skilled killer and driver. Lansky's significance extended beyond his association with Luciano. He also handled various situations for Costello, particularly in the realms of gambling and bookmaking operations. While Costello possessed considerable intelligence, having Lansky in his team alleviated the burden of managing all financial aspects independently. The structured partnership between Costello and Lansky influenced the organized crime landscape of the 50s. Lansky's presence in New Orleans, alongside Costello, marked the establishment of a stronghold for money laundering and communication, making Louisiana and New Orleans the epicenter for the criminal syndicate. This hub facilitated meetings and conflict resolutions among various organized crime groups, including the French Corsican Mafia, Cuban Mafia, Jewish Mafia, Italian Mafia, Dixie Mafia, Southern Mafia, and others. Despite the eventual shutdown after the heat in 1957, the money laundering activities of the Southern Mafia endured. Lansky's intelligence and strategic acumen were key in maintaining the ongoing success of these operations. Meanwhile, Benjamin Siegal drew inspiration from New Orleans, particularly the casino operations run by Phil Dandy Castile. Siegal utilized funds, largely sourced from Carlos Martello's criminal outfit, Chicago outfit, as well as the New York Mafia, to establish his own casino in the Las Vegas desert. The intricate connections and financial flows within organized crime during this era illuminate the complex web woven by individuals like Meyer Lansky, shaping the course of criminal enterprises and their financial endeavors. Despite the pirates on the high seas and the hijackers on land, Frank Costello by 1924 could look around him and feel a sense of triumph. Under the guidance of his mentor, Arnold Rothstein, Frank learned the art of making money through business savvy rather than bullets. Incorporating his own innate ability to connect with people, he transformed this knowledge into a vast empire, elevating him to the status of a multimillionaire. The year 1922 marked the passing of his father due to pneumonia, and now his mother resided in a comfortable 7-room house in Astoria, a far cry from their former East 108th Street residence. Despite their deep involvement in organized crime, with potential ties to violent activities, Frank Costello and Charlie Luciano shared a common trait. They both held a deep affection for their mothers, as well as their fathers. Luciano, though not particularly close to his father, consistently visited his mother, often waiting for his father to leave before doing so. On the other hand, Costello, absorbed in the complex world of crime, found himself caught up in a busy and distracting lifestyle. At times, it was his mother who had to call him, instead of him making regular visits. Nevertheless, Costello was committed to his family, ensuring the well-being of his siblings and taking care of his nieces and nephews. Notably, he provided financial support to his nephews who were going off to fight in the war. This commitment to family stood as a distinctive aspect of their lives amid the tumultuous world they navigated. Despite the whirlwind of managing the intricate operations of the illegal liquor trade, Frank always found time to visit his mother, who on one occasion in 1924 summoned him urgently. Amidst a hectic schedule, Frank responded to his mother's call and arrived at her Astoria residence. There, he encountered a young man named Frank Rizzo, elegantly dressed in a frock coat, starched shirt, and high-button shoes. Mrs. Costello explained that Rizzo, a recent immigrant, needed employment, and she expected her son to help him secure a job. Initially taken aback by Rizzo's attire, Frank questioned the practicality of hiring someone so conspicuously dressed. Nonetheless, he took Rizzo back to Manhattan and arranged for him to work at a Long Island liquor warehouse, supervised by Captain Jim O'Connell. However, O'Connell was unimpressed with Rizzo's outfit, deeming it unsuitable for the warehouse environment. Frank defended Rizzo, who insisted he would buy new clothes once he started earning. Tasked with keeping meticulous records of the incoming whiskey cases, Rizzo found the job too easy for a man of his education. Driven by a desire to contribute more, he shed his coat and shirt, assisting the men in carrying the whiskey cases. This initiative caught Frank's attention, but he reprimanded Rizzo for deviating from his assigned duties. Determined to keep the educated man engaged, Frank jokingly instructed him to write his name 10,000 times. To Frank's surprise, Rizzo took the task seriously, spending the entire week accomplishing it. Amused by Rizzo's earnestness, Frank rewarded him with a week's pay of $500 a week, considering that many men were risking their lives driving cars for the mob, transporting liquor for the same pay. Rizzo obtained his earnings without facing such dangers. Despite Frank's mother suggesting that Rizzo deserved more, he was overwhelmed by the unexpected windfall. Following his mother's guidance, Rizzo visited the bank, cashed the check, and was advised to keep some cash on hand. Mrs. Costello also guided him on sending money to his family in Italy and setting up a personal deposit. Although Rizzo bought new suits, he remained eternally associated with his initial image in a frock coat. Frank affectionately dubbed him the Professor, a moniker that endured throughout their enduring friendship, spanning the bootlegging era and well into the 50s. Upon the passing of Frank Costello, his longtime friend Frank Rizzo, known as the Professor, embarked on a transformative journey. Returning to his original hometown in Laropoli, Rizzo embraced a new chapter in his life. Transitioning from a past intertwined with organized crime, he chose the path of tranquility and fulfillment. In Laropoli, Rizzo found solace and purpose, becoming a schoolteacher. This shift marked not only a change in profession, but also a shift towards a serene and settled existence. The decision to leave behind the complexities of the past and embrace a life focused on education and community underscores the capacity for personal growth and change, even after a history entangled with figures like Frank Costello. In my documentaries, I aim to explore the intricate personalities of individuals like Luciano and Costello. Luciano, driven by a desire to be a trailblazer, envisioned breaking into an exclusive echelon of society, the aristocratic elites, seeking acceptance in a realm that seemed beyond reach. On the contrary, Costello harbored a realistic understanding, acknowledging that these elites would likely never embrace figures like him or Luciano. Despite this, Costello consistently extended himself to assist them, prompting people to ponder the enigma that was Costello and question his true aspirations. During this period, a psychiatrist formed a close connection with Costello, offering a nuanced analysis of his character from a distance. This professional evaluation delved into Costello's essence, attempting to unravel the layers of his personality and aspirations. However, despite this effort, Costello developed a disdain for the psychiatrist, convinced that the analysis was far from accurate, and that the psychiatrist fundamentally misunderstood him. This dynamic relationship adds a fascinating dimension to the exploration of Costello's complex character. The Jazz Age, marked by the lively beat of flappers and the illicit thrill of speakeasies, pulsated through the city. Texas Guinan was the unofficial hostess of New York. Mayor Jimmy Walker painted the town with Betty Compton by his side, and, quietly reigning over the bootlegging world, Frank Costello orchestrated the flow of whiskey that fueled the Roaring Twenties. Despite being a behind-the-scenes figure, unknown to the public, Frank's influence was undeniable. His business empire encompassed vast fleets of ships, truck convoys, and extensive warehouses, all seamlessly managed with absolute confidence and remarkable efficiency. Within the underworld, there was no question about who the true boss of bootlegging was. What set Frank Costello apart? How did he ascend to the pinnacle so swiftly? Where did he acquire his business acumen? And what were the defining traits that propelled him to the zenith? In a fascinating turn of events, a prominent psychiatrist, Dr. Richard Hoffman, sought to unravel the enigma of Frank's character during the height of his fame and power. Introduced to Frank through a common acquaintance, Dr. Hoffman attended a Tammany district leaders' meeting, observing the procession of dignitaries paying homage to Frank's box. Overwhelmed by the aura surrounding Frank, Dr. Hoffman remarked, "He's like Caesar holding court." This encounter marked the beginning of a friendship between the psychiatrist and Frank, prompting periodic discussions about the mobster's psyche. According to Dr. Hoffman, Frank exuded an egocentric demeanor, but harbored insecurities in various aspects of his life. His absolute confidence and thirst for power, although extraordinary, were intricately linked to these underlying insecurities. The analysis delved into Frank's background, highlighting his father's transformation from a revered soldier to a laborer subjected to mistreatment and robbery. The juxtaposition of growing up near Park Avenue, surrounded by luxury, fueled Frank's drive and revealed an innate insecurity. His success derived from an unrelenting desire to transcend his East 108th Street origins and prove himself in the world epitomized by Park Avenue. While Mina, Frank's friend's wife, questioned the practicality of these insights, suggesting that Frank should simply move to the affluent neighborhood, Dr. Hoffman emphasized that the subconscious pull of his past always influenced Frank's actions. A misstep occurred when a reporter discovered Frank's association with the psychiatrist, leading Dr. Hoffman to suggest that Frank should associate with the better people in our society. This incited Frank's anger, as he defiantly declared that he already knew more better people than the psychiatrist could fathom. Despite potential discrepancies in the analysis, it is clear that Frank's rapid ascent was not solely a product of his background. He possessed a natural ability to adapt, foresee possibilities, and exploit them. Quick-witted, articulate, and sharp-minded, Frank wielded these qualities as formidable weapons in his arsenal of success. Moreover, according to his lifelong friend, the professor, Frank was a captivating and enigmatic figure, impossible to fully understand. His grace of communication and ability to conceal thoughts made him all the more alluring. As 1924 approached, a pivotal year for Frank, his swift rise had not gone unnoticed by the government, with the Coast Guard prepared for potential conflict. In the latter part of 1923, Frank received a crucial call from one of his key men at 405 Lexington. The caller was Mike Terranova, the head of Frank's intelligence department, and his primary task involved engaging with Coast Guard personnel, understanding their strategies, and procuring valuable information to stay ahead of the game. Frank, much like Luciano, organized his criminal enterprise into distinct departments, each serving a specific purpose. These departments were dedicated to intelligence, corruption, bribery, payoffs, and ensuring timely payments. In essence, Costello's outfit resembled a walking and talking corporation, a formidable force in the realm of organized crime. The intelligence department under Costello's purview was a robust network comprising influential individuals, both internationally and domestically. Costello's reach extended beyond American borders, with intelligence agents stationed in far-flung places like Turkey, diligently working to serve his interests. This meticulous departmentalization contributed to the immense power wielded by these criminal enterprises, marking them as some of the most influential entities in the world of organized crime. During Frank Costello's trials and those involving other smugglers, a parade of stories unfolded, resembling movie scripts in their ludicrousness. Federal prosecutors would summon Coast Guards to testify, bringing forth tales that seemed almost too sensational to be true. Yet these stories were not only real, but also laid the foundation for a history that continues to echo in modern times, particularly in the realm of drug trafficking and various illicit operations. The trials exposed the clandestine world of trafficking routes, where loads were intercepted either by law enforcement or rival gangsters. The unpredictable and perilous nature of these operations became the backdrop for the evolution of organized crime. From these early days, dealing with illicit goods, be it alcohol during Prohibition or later substances like heroin and cocaine, became second nature to criminal enterprises. They had learned to navigate the dangers and uncertainties, laying the groundwork for the complex world of organized crime we see today. History tends to echo itself, especially in the realm of organized crime. There's consistently a figure at the apex, rubbing shoulders with elites, wining and dining on Wall Street, and mingling with bankers, in this case, Luciano. Another key player emerges, an innovator delving into new industries, establishing trafficking routes and delivering the product for Luciano to enter the market. Frank Costello comes into play, constructing transportation hubs across the nation while managing substantial money laundering for the mafia. Meyer Lansky comes into play. Then you have individuals like Benjamin Siegal and Vito Genovese, prepared to handle specific operations and get their hands dirty. Collectively, it forms the bedrock of organized crime, a structured and foundational network where each man plays a vital role. Meanwhile, in the mid-20s, Costello finds himself in battle with the Coast Guard. For years, the routine response had been the same: no imminent threat. However, on this particular night, Mike found himself with an urgent all-hands bulletin, one that hinted at potential disaster. As Frank entered the room, Mike, without wasting time, handed over the bulletin. Frank, still clad in his coat, read the alarming contents standing in front of the desk. The bulletin outlined the Coast Guard's ambitious plan to wage an all-out war against bootleggers. Their initial move involved borrowing 25 destroyers from the Navy, armed with formidable weaponry, including 4-inch 50 and 3-inch 50 caliber guns, 1-pounders, and manned by crews equipped with machine guns, rifles, and pistols. These destroyers boasted impressive speeds, ranging from 26 to 30 knots. The scale of the threat was substantial, with additional specially designed cutters set to join the effort. These cutters, ranging from 36 feet to 125 feet in length, were already in production. The largest among them could maintain pursuit of smuggling ships without refueling for up to a month, while the smaller boats would patrol hidden inlets and bays frequented by rum-runner skiffs. For Mike, known for keeping his composure, the gravity of the situation became apparent. A fleet, with formidable destroyers, no chance of getting through this time. It seemed that Costello was cornered. In typical Frank Costello fashion, he responded with a practical approach. Pulling out a roll of $100 bills, he tossed 2 over to Mike, instructing him to reward the informant and convey that more would follow. With that, Frank left the room, leaving Mike to lean back and, for the first time since the previous night, break into a smile. The destroyers may have had 4-inch 50 guns, and the new cutters combined guns with speed. But Frank's strategy involved more than just weaponry. It involved people. If Mike understood his boss correctly, Frank would be employing his influential touch to sway the loyalty of a significant portion of the Coast Guard. The only reason he might not secure the entire force was that Bill Dwyer, another influential figure, deserved a share of the influence. By early 1925, the full-fledged war had commenced. The Coast Guard established its headquarters at New London, Connecticut, deploying its ships over vast distances, creating an inland screen that appeared impenetrable. Rum Row, situated off Montauk, Long Island, bore the brunt of the initial assault. Destroyers strategically positioned themselves day and night behind the line of ships. During the night, their searchlights illuminated the ships, preventing skiffs from slipping alongside and initiating loading operations. Behind this destroyer line, closer to the shore, various types of cutters with diverse speeds and weaponry were stationed. Repeatedly, daring skiffs attempted to outwit or outrun the guard, only to be met with red tracers piercing the night, setting the boats ablaze. Rum Row met its demise. Smuggling ships could no longer leisurely approach a location beyond the 3-mile territorial limit and wait for skiffs to arrive because the skiffs no longer came. Each bootlegging ship reaching Rum Row was identified, shadowed, and meticulously tracked on a massive map at Coast Guard headquarters. A new era of smuggling commenced, reminiscent of colonial days when rummies eluded the king's excise officers. Freighters arrived alone, meeting at designated spots for swift unloading. For this evolving phase, Frank had a surprise for the Coast Guard, an entire fleet of his own. In Nova Scotia, he was constructing rummies with distinct characteristics. These ships, with low freeboards for reduced visibility, boasted engines capable of reaching speeds up to 17 knots. The new vessels, 160 feet long, could carry 15,000 cases, equipped with the latest radio technology. Frank implemented this cutting-edge radio equipment, establishing covert radio stations along the U.S. shoreline to direct the movements of smuggling ships and keep them informed about Coast Guard activities. Despite the speed and agility of the new boats, the destroyers could match them with collective assistance. When a destroyer spotted a speeding rummy, it radioed a flotilla of cutters offshore, prompting dozens of boats to converge on the outlaw. In these instances, Frank often had a surprise in store. Commander Thomas Backer, a Coast Guard officer, involved in such surprises, later shared this story with federal investigators, a tale that became one of Frank's favorites. As dawn broke, the bow lookout on the Coast Guard destroyer alerted the bridge through his radiophones. "Speedboat on the starboard bow. Looks like a rummy, sir." Lieutenant O'Dow, the officer of the deck, swiftly took charge upon receiving the message. He grabbed his binoculars and observed one of Costello's new fast boats about a mile ahead, racing toward the shore 10 miles away. O'Dow immediately ordered engines ahead full and woke Commander Backer. By the time Backer reached the bridge, O'Dow was in hot pursuit of the rummy, strategically cutting off its angle to shore. Commander Backer, known as one of the most enthusiastic Coast Guardsmen, had already achieved 3 kills in just 2 weeks on station. As he took command, he sensed a potential fourth kill. He coordinated with O'Dow, who sent radio messages to alert inshore patrol cutters about the rummy's location and speed. However, Backer knew that it was up to him this morning, as the rummy seemed likely to reach shore before reinforcements arrived. The destroyer rapidly closed in on the speeding rummy, black smoke billowing from its stacks. Backer sounded general quarters, and all hands were at gun stations. The order came to 50 crew: fire across his bow. Despite the gunfire, the rummy maintained its speed and direction, seemingly unfazed. Through binoculars, Backer identified the cargo of liquor stacked on deck, ready for immediate unloading. The boat's name, Elise, became visibly, but what caught his attention was a thug on the rummy's bridge, provocatively thumbing his nose at the destroyer. Infuriated, Backer ordered, "All forward guns! Commence firing! Aim for the bow!" The destroyer's crews hastily loaded and aimed the guns. Meanwhile, a seaplane zoomed over their heads, adding a new dimension to the unfolding drama. The rummy began zigzagging in anticipation of the destroyer's firing. Unexpectedly, the rummy turned in a wide arc and headed back toward them. As the 5 forward guns fired at the oncoming rummy, the seaplane dropped low above the water, releasing smoke. The destroyer was covered in black muck, but the rummy sped by, seemingly unscathed. To further complicate matters, a submarine emerged from the sea, and the rummy boat circled toward their stern. In the ensuing chaos, Backer learned that the destroyer's engines were hit and disabled. A submarine, complete with a fat German officer emerging from the hatch, posed a new threat. The German officer, via megaphone, communicated the need for assistance using the word OK. Frustrated and confused, Backer received a message from headquarters advising that there were no submarines or aircraft in the vicinity. However, a submarine was right there, and Backer, feeling unhinged, yelled at the sub to stand clear. In an unexpected turn of events, the German commander, now close enough to speak without the megaphone, greeted Americans, revealing that the submarine was French, operating under the Versailles Treaty, with a broken engine and a French crew. An hour later, another destroyer arrived, and the scene that unfolded left Commander Backer humbled. A once eager and mighty destroyer, now out of action, witnessed a cargo of liquor slipping past, untouched, and Commander Backer attributing the mishap to a German captain with a French crew. This comical episode, shared by Backer with federal investigators, before the 1926 bootlegging trial, elicited laughter. Frank Costello, upon hearing the story, found humor in the situation, especially as it unfolded with the involvement of his men in the radio operation. Smugglers faced an array of challenges, contending with the vigilant Coast Guard fleet, hijackers at sea and onshore, and the unforgiving cold and storms of the North Atlantic. Despite these obstacles, the bootleggers persevered in transporting liquor into the country. The U.S. officials, recognizing the vast resources of the Coast Guard, suspected bribery as the key factor enabling bootleggers to continue their operations. General Lincoln C. Andrews, in charge of prohibition enforcement, received this intelligence. U.S. attorneys in New York were alerted, and undercover agent Bruce Bielaski was tasked with uncovering the individuals involved in bribery. Bielaski's findings were disturbing. Entire crews, not just a few individuals, were implicated in corruption. Shockingly, some Coast Guard patrol boats turned a blind eye to incoming rummy boats, while others were directly involved in transporting liquor to shore. Costello, having learned from a previous incident, even went so far as to disguise some ships as Coast Guard cutters, with his crew posing in Coast Guard uniforms. The breakthrough occurred when a fake Coast Guard crew, disguised as the real deal, failed to exchange waves with an authentic Coast Guard ship. Upon investigation, the fake crew was discovered, leading to arrests and revelations. This discovery unraveled the biggest ring of liquor smugglers on December 4, 1925. Bill Dwyer, termed a racetrack owner, and the alleged head of the international group, became a central figure. A total of 52 individuals, including the Costello crew and Joe Milstein, were ensnared in the crackdown. U.S. Attorney Herman T. Stickman revealed that the ring headed by Dwyer was responsible for smuggling a significant portion of New York's liquor. Bribes to Coast Guard members, both in money and women, were part of their modus operandi. During Dwyer's trial, Stickman directed his accusations primarily at Dwyer, portraying him as the leading figure. Dwyer, with his affable demeanor and adorned with large diamonds, faced arraignment with a broad smile. Stickman claimed that the Costello brothers were on the purchasing end of the business, bribing various Coast Guard members. Frank, fully aware that the government's case against Dwyer often implicated him, observed the trial closely. Dwyer's defense repeatedly questioned the prosecution's knowledge of whose whiskey was being smuggled, oblivious to the fact that much of it belonged to Costello. Dwyer's trial commenced on July 7, 1926. Witnesses, including some of his captains, testified to New York City policemen's presence during unloadings. However, the most damning testimony came from Coast Guard crewmen who had been bribed by Dwyer. The crewmen, turned state's witnesses, recounted how they were on the payroll of undercover agent Bruce Lansky. The jury deliberated for 12 hours, returning near midnight with a verdict. All defendants, except Dwyer and E.C. Cochran, his alleged payoff man, were acquitted. Dwyer and his associates were sentenced to 2 years in jail, along with fines. Yet Frank Costello had identified the vulnerability in the prosecution's case. Frank Costello flagged down a taxi at the intersection of 60th and Central Park West. Heading to the Apollo Club to meet Joe Milstein, a fellow associate in his bootlegging ventures. Joe had called, indicating he was facing some trouble. Amidst his own concerns, Frank noted a crucial detail during Dwyer's trial. A majority of the witnesses were undercover agents on the government payroll. Excitedly, he shared this insight with his attorneys, realizing it could be a valuable defense strategy. With Frank's trial 2 months away, the government had yet to reveal its hand. Frank hoped they hadn't delved deeply enough to uncover the influential figures he had bribed, a sophisticated form of bribery that even Dwyer was unaware of. The doorman at the Apollo, a robust man with a distinctive birthmark, welcomed Frank warmly. Their humorous banter added a touch of camaraderie before Frank entered the club. There, at a table with a red-checked cloth, sat Milstein. Joe stood as Frank arrived, and they engaged in a conversation. Seated comfortably against the wall to survey the room, Frank noted the absence of alcoholic beverages, given the constant scrutiny from federal agents. "How's it going for you?" Joe asked respectfully. "They ain't got the body yet," Frank responded. "You think you can take care of things?" "Yeah, I bought the jury and the judge last night," Frank said with his characteristic dry humor, leaving Joe momentarily bewildered. Glancing over Joe's shoulder, Frank drew attention to Johnny Broderick, the famed detective, entering the room. Frank and Broderick exchanged glares, with Frank inwardly amused by the fact that Broderick had instructed his men never to touch him. Broderick left abruptly, and Milstein predicted he would face consequences one day. Ignoring the tension, Frank asked about Joe's problem. Joe explained an unusual incident during target practice on a boat involving shooting at tin cans and albatrosses. Frank, bemused, learned that Joe had intervened when others targeted the albatrosses, prompting a knife-throwing incident that left a man injured. Although Frank attempted to stay mad, the absurdity of the situation made it increasingly difficult. Joe faced potential charges, and Frank humorously suggested the only serious charge would be murder, for making the judge die of laughter. Frank managed to resolve the situation, with the wounded man inexplicably refusing to press charges. However, the government did charge Joe with carrying a concealed weapon. Joe's attorney, George Wolfe, handled the case, and the narrative hinted at the upcoming trial where Frank's legal acumen would be put to the test. Costello had managed to corrupt even the man tasked with leading the fight against bootlegging. In a courtroom setting, through compelling testimonies, he demonstrated that the witnesses testifying against him had been coerced. While acknowledging the truth that he had indeed corrupted numerous individuals, particularly those responsible for combating smugglers, Costello skillfully navigated the legal proceedings, challenging the integrity of the evidence presented against him. Bill Dwyer's trial grabbed headlines, while Costello's trial, involving his brother and 16 others, received little attention, exactly as Frank desired. In court, subtle distinctions between Costello and Dwyer surfaced. The revelation of seaplane use, considered unconventional at the time, showcased Costello's sophisticated operations. A witness, William R. Newman, exposed the meticulous bookkeeping on Frank's ship, Vincent White, highlighting the unique techniques employed. The identification of contact boats using dollar bill numbers added another layer to Costello's intricate modus operandi. Exploiting a weakness discovered during Dwyer's trial, Frank seized the opportunity to question the credibility of government witnesses. Newman's admission of being a spy for Meyer Lansky, the Treasury undercover agent, on a $250 weekly pay, raised doubts about the witnesses' motivations. Coast Guardsman Hughes and Brown testified, shedding light on Costello's bribery methods. Brown's comical anecdotes about smuggling liquor while inebriated revealed the challenges faced by a bootlegging boss. More significantly, Brown unveiled Costello's reach to higher echelons, implicating Samuel Briggs, an executive officer at Coast Guard headquarters. The revelation that Costello had bribed key figures directing anti-bootlegging operations explained the persistent flow of illegal liquor into the country. Additional Coast Guardsmen testified, but the bombshell came when Briggs testified that Costello had reached General Andrews, Assistant Secretary of the Treasury, and Head of Prohibition Enforcement, the driving force behind the anti-smuggling effort. Briggs detailed a lunch with Costello's paymaster, Coffey, discussing joint ownership of the schooner Athenia with General Andrews. Allegedly, Andrews would receive a substantial share from each transaction, potentially reaching $100,000 annually. Despite Andrews' denial, the revelation suggested a compromise at the highest level. Frank, now facing heightened concern, relied on exposing government witnesses' affiliations with Meyer Lansky. Captain Nicholas Brown's cross-examination revealed that he had been coerced into testifying after being chained in the Coast Guard ship's brig. In a masterstroke, a defendant, Lewis, battered and scarred, claimed to have been assaulted by Meyer Lansky's staff. This incident emphasized the questionable conduct of the government's witnesses, reinforcing the defense's argument against biased testimony. The jury's decision favored Costello, with 8 defendants acquitted and the remaining undecided. The government's plan to retry Costello faced numerous delays, with witnesses mysteriously disappearing and the case file vanishing. Years later, reminiscing with Frank in 1943, he reflected on the events, taking pride in orchestrating a hung jury. The witnesses' elusive nature and the lost file further thwarted the government's attempts to retry the case. As the conversation turned to Joe Milstein, Frank's amusement resurfaced, recalling the Albatross case. The mention of the hung jury prompted a sly remark from Frank about owning that one crucial vote. The government's prolonged delay and the disappearance of witnesses hinted at Frank's continued influence. The tale concluded with a note on Judge Winslow's resignation, citing corruption and misconduct charges, indirectly connected to Frank's case. Frank's triumphant evasion of charges, despite widespread knowledge of his guilt, marked a pivotal moment in his career. The enigma surrounding Frank Costello intensified as he, now a millionaire, experienced a thriving business. His pragmatic approach to operations not only enriched him, but also benefited numerous mafia and underworld affiliates, with his oft-quoted mantra being, "Everybody gets his share." However, the windfall of prosperity triggered turmoil within the mafia. In this segment of the documentary, we've delved into the historical roots of Frank Costello's bootlegging empire, a monumental effort akin to Luciano's painstaking creation of a criminal outfit. Costello emerged as a cornerstone of their syndicate, his influence reaching the 5 families in New York, Chicago, Florida, and extending to Louisiana, Cuba, Europe, and beyond. He was a mob boss with unparalleled connections, weaving his own narrative across various territories. This exploration is just one facet of Costello's extensive history, intertwining with key moments in organized crime from the 1929 Atlantic City Convention and dealings with Al Capone to the rise of Franklin D. Roosevelt and the fall of Luciano. The next part of the documentary will delve into Costello's intricate web of connections, his slot machine empire in Louisiana, ties with Huey Long, and the establishment of the Carlos Marcello crime family. Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe to my channel.